Hey Acers, I want to do a special today on one of my favorite subsystems in Savage Worlds. Now, Savage Worlds has several good subsystems, very, very good ones. Chases are one of them and things like that. But one of the things that makes Savage Worlds possibly one of my favorite systems ever is they put a subsystem in there for what are called interludes. Now, what is an interlude? They are, it's something that you tell in character to help the story progress, to make it so it's more fun and it feels more like a movie or something real that is happening. So let's talk about that for a second. An interlude is something I think that is so underused. It's something that you can use when your characters first meet and they say, well, I'm from Ohio. Now that would be an opening that's a great opening for, you're from Ohio, huh? Well, I went to Ohio once and I left a raincoat in Cleveland. And even an interlude could be something as silly as using the raincoat in Cleveland idea. It's from a movie. There's a movie called Brain Donors. Very silly. But the uppity dancer, he looks at the Roland Flackvisor, the literal ambulance chasing lawyer, and he says, "My shoes are in the Louvre in Paris," trying to say that he's this amazing person. And Roland looks at him and goes, "So what? Last year I left a raincoat in Cleveland." So that's where I got it from. But anyway, the point is, those are both interludes. And they were just one-line interludes. But that makes those characters so much more. It tells you that the great Valari, whose shoes are in the Louvre in Paris, he considers himself to be the pinnacle of ballet, to be the greatest human being in ballet. Because the Louvre is, of course, this great museum in Paris that's there and people go to, and it's debated whether or not the Mona Lisa is actually there, that kind of thing. And it could lead into an adventure. On the other hand, Roland Flackvisor coming back and saying, "So last year I left a raincoat in Cleveland." Him saying that makes it so, one, what the great Valari was posting himself at has just been reduced. And two, it says that Roland doesn't care about this guy's past. That his past says, you just gotta sign this deal with me. And this is why interludes are cool. Let's take another example of an interlude. Something a little more friendly to us as role players. The fantasy battle is going on, which there is a subsystem in Savage Worlds for mass battles. So you can have your characters participate in a big Battle of Gondor kind of thing, or the Battle of Helm's Deep. You can have them participate in that. But it doesn't need to be a miniatures battle game to recreate it. Because ultimately, we know the orcs lose. So, that is one of those things that, and that's part of the reason why I don't like doing named battles for my taste. I really don't like doing named battles because we already know how they came out. That's part of the reason why when I run Star Wars, I don't like to run with Skywalkers, because admittedly, there's people out there who know the Skywalkers better than I do. And I do admit I don't know what kind of an ist it is. It's kind of elitist, kind of snobbish, but at the same time, as I love good stories, I really didn't like any of the other Star Wars movies other than the original trilogy. And for that matter, even Return of the Jedi, as I've gotten older, I'm realizing there's a lot more packed, a lot more just too well wrapped up. George Lucas created an incredible universe, and Star Wars became what it was because of its editors. And Star Wars, in and of itself, is one of the greatest pieces of film history. 1977, Star Wars. So I was not even a year old when it came out. but my parents took me as a babe in arms and kept me bouncing the whole time to watch it. And it was as soon as in 1981, 4 years later, they took me to see Empire Strikes Back. I remember seeing it at the theater in Provo, Utah. And I remember my little sister, she was only like 2 at the time, and she had R2-D2 underoos. My parents, I don't know where they were able to splurge those from, but I think my dad was working for Grand Central at the time. But anyway, she had R2-D2 underoos, and she got sick and threw up. And I don't think it was at the theater, but I remember equating her throwing up with R2-D2 throwing up after he falls in the swamps at Dagobah. But Empire Strikes Back is unarguably one of the greatest movies ever made. Period. Just any genre. And it is one of the best cases of a sequel actually being better than the original. Not many things hold to that. But then you get Empire Strikes Back, and it's so amazing. It's really well written. Larry Kasdan did a great job on that. And then you get Return of the Jedi, and things start tying back together too easily. A and B, Ewoks. Okay, I love that all those little people got jobs. And I liked the Ewoks at the time because I was a kid. It was great marketing. Cuddly teddy bears that could defeat an empire. But Wookiees would have made better sense. And George Lucas started making cuts and decisions at that point that started bringing down the quality of the overall story. I mean, it had a great final lightsaber battle between Luke and Vader. That was so fabulous. That's what I had always waited for, and that's what I'd always seen in my mind's eye, was that fight. And it lived in my mind. Well, that's why I don't like trying to recreate Star Wars from Star Wars. That's why I applaud my friend Tracy Sizemore. She did a Harry Potter game, and she wrote a great Savage Worlds Harry Potter game, but it takes place 7 years before Harry Potter is to go to Hogwarts. It takes place when he's 4. And so the events of that story do not affect the actual canon events. So if I'm to run a Star Wars game, it's either going to be set so far in the past, like in the days of the Old Republic or something, that the events there do not affect or interact with the canon of the original trilogy. And I'll give Rogue One a little bit of leeway, but I still think I'll have to do a story sometime about what I think a great follow-up to Rogue One would be. Because, I mean, there were some parts about Rogue One that I still had issues with, and I'll get into that when I do that Darth Vader detective movie. But I'll record that, I promise, and that'll be coming up. And that will not be under the Ace Role-Playing Games moniker or anything like that. It's just going to be a standalone video, and I'm going to talk about what I think could be a great, great Star Wars film. Okay, that said, I do encourage you that, like, if you're in a fantasy battle, and your dwarf and your elf are having orc kill competitions, so very much leaning on Tolkien again, go ahead and have them tell each other stories. Or you can even have, like, all your special ops people back to back in a circle as they're shooting out bad guys. And one guy can say, "Hey, does this remind you of that time when?" And that's when what the elf and the dwarf can say to each other. "Oh, this reminds me of the time when I was chopping down orcs in that forest, or in that mine." And then the elf can say, "Oh, it reminds me of the time when I was plugging them in the forest as they were walking in. I was just sniping them off from the trees." So that's kind of an example of an interlude. So let me give you the rules for interludes, and you can apply them however you will. But like I said, this is also great for kicking off a role-playing game session, or a campaign, or even a one-shot at a convention. You give the players time to get to know their characters a little bit and imagine some of the closings of the gaps. The things that, and that's why we love Star Wars, is because in our minds we close the gaps. So you can give them a chance to give these pieces of their backstories, or build and add to the world that you're already creating, or you can use it, like I said, to throw a emotional interlude into a large, intense, massive battle. So the basic of it is that you are going to, the player characters tell stories from their character's point of view, and or at least about their character, because you're going to have some players who are shy, and they're just going to say, my character grew up on the mean streets but became well educated. And so if they just even say that much, give them a Benny, because this could be the first chance you give to give them a Benny, to give them something to show them that you, as their game master, will reward them for being a good player. And it encourages a weaving of role playing into the overall story that you are creating. And that weaving of role playing is moving that camera in and out. And I'll have to do another one on camera movements, because there are 3 levels of camera movement, and I've touched on it, so I'll give you the basics, but I'll talk more about it in detail in another video. The first level is 30,000 foot view, or world level view. You're not even going to focus. Your characters aren't even in the picture right now. We're seeing the world, and you can describe that world to your players and let them contribute to it through an interlude and earn bennies because they're contributing. Second is now we see the party. We zoom in another level. We see the party. We see what they're doing. Third level is in all the way to one single character, and they're the one with the screen time at that moment. And encourage your players. Give them bennies when they pass the spotlight to somebody else, when they pass the camera focus to somebody else, and they set somebody else to use their skill to solve this puzzle right now. So that's how you can use interludes, and you can even have interludes that link player characters together. So when you want to give them a chance to just catch their breath, get into character, or like I've given lots of other examples as to where you'd use it, you can let them talk about their character's backstory, and you can give them, and what you do is you give them a card from the action deck. And it's the suit that determines the type of story they want to tell. Now, they have 3 options of stories to tell. The first is a downtime story. What they do when left alone. Like, to quote here, a priest might quietly read a holy text while a warrior constantly sharpens his blades. Second option is a backstory, pure backstory option. And it's about their past. Incidentally, if somebody ever comes to you and says, my character was a famous general, and you're just doing basic beginning characters, novice characters, then tell them, I'm sorry, get me a different backstory, because if you've been this general and you've been this amazing person and won all these wars and battles, why are you now a first level character, or a novice character? And it works for D&D too, or any other system, but still, novice characters do not have amazing backstories yet, but they can. And then the third option is a trek story. Story of an obstacle or challenge the party encountered on their trip. So, anybody who participates gets a Benny. And if everybody laughs because they tell it so well, they tell it such in character, they're the gruff-voiced dwarf. Or, hey, you could even have them switch it up, and if they can tell it as a more elfin-voiced dwarf. Now, you see, when I was in the mines, you could have whatever mix up. I mean, you could make, instead of a Scotsman being the dwarf, you could make a Scotsman be the elf. Right then, we were going through the trees, and we saw the orcs down there below. So, here are the categories. The 4 categories are 4 suits. Spades. The character, when they're alone, spends time in quiet contemplation. What do they do? What are they contemplating? What are they studying? What are they thinking about? How do they just contemplate life? Now, a spade backstory choice is a story of a great victory or personal triumph. Now, the backstory choices, these were all actually in the previous edition of Savage Worlds, but this one even flushed it out further. So this 2018 excellent version of Savage Worlds, that we're now on the 5th printing of. If you don't have your copy, get online and order it. They're coming. Printing things are shipping is delayed for everybody right now. So don't be impatient. Get yourself a copy. Okay, so the great personal victory or triumph is the backstory for Spades. And the Trek story for Spades is a difficult obstacle the group negotiated along on a journey. Like, they could be sitting at the campfire finally going, huh, can you believe we got through all that? That quicksand, nobody saw it coming. We were just lucky that you over there were there to help us get it taken care of. So things like that. And you can coach them, you can guide them a little bit, but don't give them the story. Let them tell it. Your downtime story for Hearts is they're practicing the skill. What is that skill? And what are the outputs of that skill? A backstory for the Hearts is a tale of your hero's greatest love, lost, found, present, or waiting for her back home. Or the Trek story is how the party endured a trying hardship on the journey. So, Spades is obstacle. Hearts is a hardship. Well, let's look at Diamonds now. The downtime is character studies or works on an object of some sort. What is it? 2, the Diamonds is the character it's a thing that your character wants. Could be a material possession, recognition, political goal, trip they want to take, the amazing destination, some sort of thing or activity that they want to do. And the Trek option is how the group found something that helped them along the way, such as an oasis, a minor treasure, ammo, food, friendly locals, whatever. Now, clubs, and if you've been playing Savage Worlds long enough now, you should know that clubs is kind of the uh-oh suit, but not necessarily bad. It's just, well, this is going to be complicated. So your hero's brooding or angry about something. What are they doing? How do they misbehave because of it? Backstory, a tale of misfortune from your hero's past, perhaps revealing something of his hindrances or a dark secret. That's something that does the character that's being played trust the other characters enough to actually tell them about why they're on the run from their kingdom. And then finally, the Trek is a hardship the party overcame on their trip. So that's kind of like the one on in Hearts, but here's the thing: it's going to involve tragic death of a favorite extra, spoiled or lost supplies, a mechanical breakdown, abysmal weather, and so on forth from that. So these are the 4 groupings and the 12 options for interludes. And I've talked enough about those kind of things that you can see where an interlude can come in. I mean, Star Wars is full of them. Like when Luke fails. Okay, so he's just made that attempt to raise the X-Wing out of the swamp, and it sinks further in. He failed. And Yoda says, "Look at me. Judge me by my size, do you?" And he's able to tell Luke about the Force before he, in turn, just aces that roll several times over and just bloop, bloop, picks up the X-Wing and sticks it on land. So that's what interludes are and what they're for. I hope you're getting some sort of a benefit out of this, and I hope that this gives you some ideas on ways that you can introduce interludes into your games and make them better. Remember, the world is a better place because you're in it, and I love you. If no one else has told you that today, I do. You're amazing, and I'm glad you're here, and I look forward to seeing you at my table.